Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Wu Says. This is where we get real about US, China, and everywhere and everything in between. It's two superpowers, but really one global story. This week on Wu Says, we turn to one of the defining power struggles of our time: artificial intelligence. With the US and China accelerating their rivalry on everything from chips to data to regulation, is AI the new frontier for geopolitical competition? That's what we want to explore. And joining me, as always, is Professor Thye, who will help us unpack what this means for the world, what this AI race will mean, and how countries should navigate between the tech superpowers. So joining me now is Prof. Wu. Prof. Wu, let's talk a little bit about this. So what's interesting about how AI has unfolded in our time is it seems that there's notes of history in it. So it brings us back to when there was another big boom in technology. Every time the world goes through these technological revolutions, everything changes, global dynamics, the global economy. So talk to me a little bit about how the current AI revolution maybe brings us, or there are lessons from, say, the industrial revolution from the past.
Well, the Industrial Revolution certainly brought about a dramatic reconfiguration of human society. We moved from an urban society to a rural society. We moved from a rural society to an urban society, largely because the steam engine enabled manufacturing, which requires people to be in much closer quarters with each other than before. And it certainly brought about us great prosperity. But on the journey from the rural society to the urban society, we did go through a very painful period. A very painful period in terms of the jobs of the past basically disappeared, but there was new jobs appeared. So there was a reshaping of the distribution of jobs, from people making horsewhips to people making leather belts and screws and nuts and bolts. What is happening is there will no doubt be a reshaping of the workplace, but the part that would hit us immediately would be the loss of jobs. In other words, the number of jobs that will be lost will be the greater than the number of jobs that are created immediately. In the case of the Industrial Revolution, in England, there were a group of people called Luddites, because they claimed to be led by Mr. Ludd, L-U-D-D. Luddites were displaced farm workers and factory workers who went around destroying new machines. So the first prediction of the coming of AI in the production process is that there would be layoff of workers, not only in manufacturing, but also in the white collar level. Elon Musk has said that the entry level white collar jobs would basically disappear. AI, of course, some people, of course, would think that not all of it disappear, because if you ever had called Malaysia Airlines recently, you will get a chatbot. And thank God, when you insist on talking to a human, they still give you a human. But I think there'll be improvements to the chatbots such that many of our questions could be answered satisfactorily, which means that even jobs like call centers would be eliminated. So the first thing is, many people would say, isn't it great? We'll have so much leisure. Now, yes, we'll have so much leisure, but the question is, suppose how are we going to buy the goods that are produced? If there are, because clearly you cannot just have production without people buying. So that is the first question. How are we going to distribute the big increases in output from this new technology? Elon Musk, I cannot help but to cite him largely because he has been at the forefront of pushing for it, and he basically agrees that there'll be a big loss in jobs. So he has said that there should be what we call universal basic income. In other words, we are all guaranteed a minimum level of income. It's almost like the day you are born, the state gives you 3 robots to support you for the rest of your life.
Sorry, Elon Musk said that.
Now, Elon Musk is universal basic income.
Wow.
And what my little bit of amendment of that is the state
The
gives you
ro-
2 robots to take care of you.
Okay, so if that's the case, then we want to look at the distribution of how to distribute the output that will come from the development or the growth of artificial intelligence. I do wonder how this will change the landscape because, again, with any kind of redistribution of growth, inequality can happen. It might not necessarily be a fair and equal distribution of the benefits of AI. How do you see this? Do you worry about an AI divide where AI exacerbates global inequalities?
Well, it would exacerbate inequality even within the United States, the countries of origin of AI. If you were to look at new technology that comes about, they first have monopoly power over the ownership of the assets. And that certainly create a tremendous amount of income. If you remember, the socialism as a movement came during the Industrial Revolution because some people really got filthy rich while people were just losing their jobs with the new machinery. So the history of the world is that new technology would make redistribution of income to be more concentrated than before. Then society would have to undertake corrective actions. For example, transfer scheme. So the basic universal basic income that Elon Musk has talked about is a form of, you could say, welfareism that that smooths over the pain of loss of jobs. But yes, it is likely that there will be a huge increase in inequality before it gets better. And that increase in inequality comes with massive loss of jobs. So we have to think of the design of social safety nets. Basically, how would Malaysia Madani be reconfigured in order to ensure inclusiveness among the people in the country?
Right.
And yes, it will exacerbate the the gap between countries because the poorest country, but the fact is that the cost of the new technology will go down over time. That is certainly the case anytime when there's a new widespread technology that comes about. There'll be this great enthusiasm. 100 firms will appear and they will all invest like mad in the new technology. And that's when you get your bubble. And then there'll be a shakeout. Then at the end of it, you might have 3, 4 companies that dominate the industry.
Do you see what's happening currently with all this talk about an AI bubble and how it's on the precipice or the verge of bursting? Do you see any similarities to the dot-com bubble of the late 90s? Is that similar? I mean, there was so much talk about the dot-com bubble bursting, and we still have the internet today. We still have these companies from the 90s today, and they're still doing well. Do you see some similarities with what's being talked about with this AI bubble?
Oh, the bubbles will be inevitable, but and that will be the cost of the redistribution of wealth among the rich people. Many of them would disappear if they do not get out of the business in time. It's just like China once had over 200 EV companies, and that number is shrinking. And these are all not just state supported, most of them are private.
Wow.
People get into it because if you can outlast the competition, there's a lot of money to be made. And in this case, the game is so new, and so we see a great proliferation of data centers, because that'll be the first thing that is needed in the digital transformation.
Okay. Well, since you brought up China, let's take a look at the major AI players. Of course, China really is emerging as a major AI adopter, especially in manufacturing. I think fintech also is another area that they're really, really leading the pack on. How would you say China's approach to AI is different from other countries compared to US? So let's take the two global superpowers here. Compare how each superpower is approaching artificial intelligence.
Well, you could see that both countries recognize that there is a technological revolution that would greatly transform the production landscape. But they also see that it is not just economic competitiveness that could be changed. It will be the balance of power. Who would have the more powerful AI weapon than the other person? So we are on the cusp of the world having to make a decision. It's like after we found the splitting of the atom, how much of the splitting of the atom will be used for energy, to support the industry, or we use it to destroy the other party. So peace and getting along has become even more important than before, because AI is, you could see this in drones. With the first drones that were used very successfully in reversing the fortune of a battle was in Ethiopia. A few years ago, when Tigray and the federal government within Ethiopia had a fight, the Tigrayans were within miles of Addis Ababa. And what happened? Then they were all pushed back because the federal government bought drones from Turkey. And that was able to destroy the supply lines of Tigrayans and push them back into Tigray. Now, the important thing to realize is that we have got a lot more sophisticated than that now. In the old days, the drone actually has to be driven. Someone controls it remotely, and someone has to press a button to fire the rocket. But now, in the Ukraine war, we have autonomous drones that take off, and they analyze the situation on the ground, and it fires according to its programming. So there's no human holding the trigger anymore. Now the question is, what if we reach the stage where if we happen to, there may come a time where AI becomes smarter than people. And if one of them would turn rogue because of misprogramming, or maybe lightning struck it and the circuit went from good guy to bad guy, how do we turn off the rogue a drone? Because after all, machinery going wrong happens all the time because we have robots in production, in use, and sometimes some robots start throwing the product that it was making because there was some electrical fault in the motherboard, and the drone just go mad, and of course they switch it off. Now the question is, a super smart robot may be able to resist your ability to shut it down. And in the design of the new weapon system, there may not be a shutdown button. Largely, this is to prevent the other side from hijacking your drone and turning it against you, or switching it off. So we as a group have to decide on the peaceful use of AI.
Yeah.
That is very important.
Yeah, I mean that is such a really good point, because as AI becomes more central to not just economic power but military power, I think it's important for countries, all countries, to think about how they are shaping global AI governance standards, right? And it's not just rules that are written by the superpowers. I want to come back to that a bit later, but I just want to follow up with you on how you see the US. So we talked a little bit about how this is maybe being adopted globally and how it could be adopted. But what are your thoughts on how the US is approaching AI? Is it similar to that of China? Are they taking a more progressive or forward-looking approach to AI, especially under the Trump administration?
Well, during the Biden administration, you could certainly hear a lot of words of caution about the need for careful regulation of AI. And in fact, the person who's called the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, he used to work for Google. He was the head of the Google team on AI. He resigned so that he could speak up against the way that AI was being developed at Google, largely because he thought that there was not enough safety being built into the protocol of releasing AI.
Okay.
So, because of the efforts of people like Geoffrey Hinton, there was a lot of responsiveness on the federal government. But in the case of Donald Trump, he has certainly been very gung-ho about it, having extreme faith in that the private sector would regulate itself. And of course, that was our attitude towards the appearance of new financial instruments that finally led to the meltdown in 2008, when mortgage-backed securities caused the meltdown in Wall Street. So we need more regulation, and I hope that we do not introduce them only after a bad disaster.
Right.
In the case of China, there is more control over AI, largely because the government recognizes that AI is an instrument that could undermine its control of society. For example, the internet. You just think how much easier people could now talk to each other, the pictures and so forth. And the worst part is that AI has become so good, we can produce videos
Yes.
that are just fake.
Yeah.
And AI, unless we are very careful on how it's regulated, it will undermine any government in the world
Right. Yeah.
by
I mean,
completely destroying trust in news, for
yeah.
example.
Yeah, as a news media practitioner, I am terrified. Have you seen how good those new AI videos are? It is virtually indistinguishable from video from photographic evidence. I mean, is the age of video evidence now no longer applicable because we just cannot trust what we see on the internet? It's so good, those AI videos.
It is so realistic. Like, for
Realistic,
example,
yes.
a friend of mine, Jeffrey Sachs, told me that around 10 fake videos of him appeared every day. But there's nothing he can do to stop it because YouTube has protected itself with laws that it bought in Washington, D.C.,
Mm.
that they are not responsible for the content that is shown on their website. So it says, I'm just a platform. I didn't put it there, and I take no responsibility for someone making you sound stupid. So that is, uh, it requires actions that are quite comprehensive
Right.
across the board. But
I
of
feel
course, we
yes.
regulations always lag behind
Right.
innovation.
Yeah. I feel for him for having all those videos. I mean, I have some out there as well. And I just want to put it out on the record that I will never promote any dodgy real estate investments. That if you see a video of me doing that, that is definitely not me. It is AI. Can I, before we move into what this means for the rest of the world, can I ask you one more question about China and the US in terms of the talent that it takes to continue this AI revolution because it requires, and I don't know whether China is leading in this in terms of AI talent or uh, the necessary education system, the necessary brains that go into developing new AI or taking AI forward. Is the US able to catch up with China in this race? And correct me if I've got that wrong, whether my assumptions of China leading this AI talent race is incorrect.
Well, it is hard to measure who is leading because what's the metrics? Because you could see that 60% of what we call to be AI patents are held by China. Now, the question is, are they the key patents? Because you can always, you know, patent your invention. But the question is that invention finally become the industry standard or not? So even though China is ahead in the numbers, what it would be hard to say that it controls the most important technology. Because right now, it is generally agreed that Silicon Valley is ahead
Mm.
in this. And for example, you could see the latest chips are still designed, the most advanced chips are still being designed in the United States, albeit that the Chinese have claimed that they have now come up with chips that does quantum computing, which is several levels of higher speed. Now, suppose you're able to design a much more powerful chip, the next step is, can you translate it into a chip? Can you make it? And in other words, can you, because the more powerful a chip is, the more circuits there are within the chip. And the more circuits there are, the hotter the chip is. And if it becomes too hot, it stops working. So you got to make it very thin so that it can be cooled down quickly. And one thing we do know is the Chinese cannot make chips as thin as the Americans have been able to do. The ASML company, which is the company that makes the machine that makes the small thin chips, although that may not necessarily be able to hold the Chinese back, because you use a less efficient chip, but then you may be 10 seconds behind the other side in generating an answer, but you don't necessarily not get the correct answer. But more importantly, most of inventions that takes place when you know that the other side has succeeded in doing a particular task. Once you know that it is possible to do something, you are very focused in your search. And so people do catch up.
Right.
And
Yeah,
then
for sure.
and the way it happens is, unless you don't sell any of your latest products, once you sell one unit of your latest product, the other side, when it get hold of one, just unpack it and see how you do something. And they figured out how to make the
Right.
same thing. So
Right.
you could say it is good that we are able to learn from each other, and that is what economics values as competition.
Right.
That
So
competition is good.
So we've talked about US and China and how they're adopting AI, but I do want to ask for maybe if we brought it home for a country like Malaysia, we're neither an AI frontier developer. We're not really a late adopter. We're in the game, but what do you think countries who are in the middle of these big superpowers, how should they think about AI? And especially when we know AI will impact the labor market, will impact the socioeconomic, will impact everything, consumption patterns. Yes, definitely. So how do you think countries like Malaysia should approach this?
Well, one thing for sure is a society that is prepared in the following ways. One is to be able to participate in industries that use AI intensively. So the training of people, the technical skill is important. But what is also important, the only way we can really get ahead, is that you got to be more creative than the average programmer. In other words, I cannot out-memorize what ChatGPT already know, but I can think of cleverer ways to do things than what ChatGPT has collected from other people so far. So in a way, education has to take the stress on kind of getting people, the best of its population, to develop the critical thinking skill and hence creativity much more. And I myself think that the distribution of intelligence is the same across every racial group, label, income group, or whatever. But what in the end that matters is that you are able to have synergy. In other words, the cleverest 10% in Malaysia have to be in big constant touch with the cleverest 10% in the US, the cleverest 10% in China, so that we are able to be up to date in what they are up to. So the advantage of a country like China, when you ask whether it's ahead or not, is that the absolute number of the 10% is much bigger than the 10% in the US. And one thing we do know about analytical, intellectual work, is that the more smart people together, they form a critical mass, such that what they produce is greater than what the sum of individual contribution. So we hope that common global prosperity is made more possible because we are able to keep all the top 15% of every country very connected to each other. And what we need to teach them is you got to take care of the other 85% too. But the truth is the other 85% would be able to will have to do other things.
Other
And
things, yeah.
unfortunately, they will be the one that we have to focus the universal basic income coverage for.
Right, right. Well, I guess that's all the time we have for this episode of Wu Says. Prof. Wu, thank you so much for getting real about the US and China and everything and everywhere in between, particularly about AI in this episode. So that's it for this episode of Wu Says. I'm Melisa Idris, and I will see you in the next episode. Till then, bye-bye.